Good morning. So what I'm going to continue on with courage. Continue chewing through it, and before I get into the next level, which is neutrality, level 250, I might read a little Emerson. I'm kind of still figuring out this channel, and maybe I'll work on the graphics or whatever eventually. So here we go. There is therefore the ability to detect pretense and the illusions by which imagination and fantasy replace logic and balance. Because below 200, truth has been sold out for gain, there is the incapacity to discern truth from falsehood. He wrote a whole book about that. And fallacies are accepted uncritically as being convincing. Thus, below 200, there is actually a significant loss of reality testing, as well as intellectual capacity. People below calibration level 200 are unable to use the muscle test for truth and get false results. While below level 200, there is the capacity to process facts, which are linear. There is not yet the capacity to discern truth, which is nonlinear, and depends on the capacity for abstract thought. Lower mind uses facts to support positionality, whereas higher mind respects balance, meaning, and concordance of levels of abstraction. Again, I probably need to define some of these words. Thus, progressively, meaning is aligned with levels of truth as a consequence of disciplined rules of logic and reason rather than wishful thinking. Below level 200, facts are assembled without respect for categories of equal value, and contrary evidence is ignored or rationalized away. Thus, higher mind is subject to discipline, the laws of dialectics, and the requirements of intellectual integrity. All right. The discernment of truth thus depends on recognition of context, which profoundly influences and categorizes meaning and significance. And as I read, the ego doesn't function on context. The ego functions on falsehood. And, the ideas of duality, our ideas of duality are, like I said before, the main problem in humanity, because ego functions on duality. That's how we're controlled. We're controlled by duality. So even I'm planning a trip to Greece at the end of August. So I've been looking into the pagan ceremonies and rituals that they did, which, I'd like to get more, not into the ceremonies per se, but I'd like to be what's the word for it? Anyways, that's yeah. I'd like to explore more. So the discernment of truth thus depends on recognition of context, which profoundly influences and categorizes meaning and significance. While facts, when logically assembled, can be cited as proof, truth is of a different level of abstraction and can only be substantiated by other means of confirmation. Even at best, the human mind, in and of itself, intrinsically unable to discern fact from truth and truth from falsehood. So just know that. That's even at best, the human mind, in and of itself, is intrinsically unable to discern fact from truth and truth from falsehood. And Hawkins wrote a whole other book, Truth versus Falsehood, which I'll probably get eventually. This is, like I said, this knowledge is foundational. It's not just psychology. It's understanding consciousness. The discernment of truth is supported by humility and the spirit of balanced, integrous inquiry. A classic example is that of the Wright brothers, who were ridiculed by the fact that aircraft are heavier than air and therefore unable to fly. That selected facts can lead to very erroneous conclusions, as well exemplified by the argument of skepticism. Now, transcending level 200. We'll finish up here. The view of God at 200 is that of confidence, justice, balance with authority, and the provision for mechanisms to compensate for the lack of perfection through salvation, to accept responsibility for defects, and to strive for morality. This more benign view of divinity replaces the lower levels anthropologic projected images of God. Anthropologic meaning compared to a human being. Projected images of God as prone to extreme human weaknesses such as pride, harshness, judgmentalism, vengeance, anger, partiality, and jealousy of seeming ethnic and geographical favoritism. Even the God of Israel, or the God of the Bible, has been described as a jealous God, as like an angry God, as the judge. But I think that's inappropriate. As Chuck Swindoll Jr. says a lot, to try to describe God or the idea of divinity is inappropriate. And human beings have done that throughout history. They've tried to put God in a box, and describe him or her. It's in terms of human characteristics, which is, it's just stupid. It's beyond stupid. It's extremely inappropriate. You can't describe divinity. It goes beyond religions, mindsets. So at level 200, religion is respected and seen to be an option rather than a threat. But like I said, I I don't treat David Hawkins as the Messiah or his books, but they are helpful to glean from, and that's what I want to do in this channel, is try to glean from different sources. The Transcendentalists, Emerson, Chuck Swindoll, David Hawkins, even Greek mythology and the philosophers that existed there, which I will eventually. Primary principles are to avoid sin, accept spiritual responsibility, and reject temptation. And keep in mind, this is just the beginning. This is at courage, at level 200, we're just barely getting our nostrils above water. Prayer is seen as both worshipful and confirmatory of God's will, and to ask for guidance is natural as a consequence of humility and acceptance of character defects. That's why a lot of righteous people tend to be religious or go to church, But as you go up the levels of consciousness, your mind gets clear even of religion or going to church, which still functions on duality. Thus, morality tends to be a major focus that often reflects itself in socially responsible attitudes and respect for traditional values. Although there is still fear of divine judgment, it is ameliorated by faith in God's fairness, mercy, and forgiveness in response to contrition and the promise of salvation. The dedication to sinlessness and integrity brings character defects into awareness, resulting in spiritual humility and the awareness that without God's help, the ego and its limitations are difficult or sometimes impossible to overcome. The fear of sin, although not overwhelming, is still a serious consideration. This leads to religious affiliation and observances that are seen as rational as well as comforting. Respect for authority results in acceptance of and compliance with religious/spiritual concepts, along with an understanding of the necessity for faith. And that's kind of another. So faith to me is different than belief. Belief. I've talked about this before, but belief and worship have to do with control. Faith has to do with disobeying and, being true to oneself. And I'll finish with this paragraph. Courage is the result of an act of the will by which the decision is made to accept inner honesty and integrity as axiomatic principles of life to be followed despite all resistances, temptations, and obstacles. Duty to self and others results in alignment with spiritual principles and the courage to overcome these obstacles and resistances. By intention and successful practice, here we go with these words. The vicissitudes of life, both internal and external, become opportunities for increasing strength. This is the foundation for trust in oneself, in God, in spiritual truth, and in life itself, established on a rock-like foundation. Excuse me. So next, okay, that was courage. Next, we're getting into neutrality. And these are, keep in mind, this is just the beginning of spiritual alignment and climbing up the levels of consciousness. These are still like linear minded, in a sense, dualistic. These describe righteous people, not righteous people that have yet to get into levels of enlightenment. So, all right, I think I'll stop there, and next time we'll either get into neutrality or read some Emerson. All right, thanks.